Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, distinguished guests, and folks of all stripes, put your hands together for the Space Cadet Sports Podcast. Houston, we have Paul Salazar Jr.
Hey y'all, welcome back to the Space Cadet Sports Podcast, your Houston Astros podcast for diehard Houston Astros fans. From a diehard Houston Astros fan. I am the aforementioned Astro fan. I am Paul Salazar Jr. I am a screenwriter, an actor, a producer who is now a digital content creator and podcaster. Quite the step up with my use of talents, of course. I'm a native Houstonian who has lived out in Los Angeles for the last decade plus, trying to work in the entertainment industry, some years successfully doing that, and other years starting a sports podcast. Welcome to the Space Cadet Sports Podcast. I started the Space Cadet Sports Podcast and blog with the new and refreshing perspective of actually liking and being a fan of the Houston Astros. I feel like the media always tends to be a little bit negative or doom and gloom about them. The negativity coming from either LA or New York, where obviously those media markets are not going to be too fond of the Houston Astros. And I feel like the Houston media is a lot of doom and gloom, a lot of anger, a lot of frustration, as if, we just have a right to go to the World Series every season, and if we don't, then everything's a failure. Obviously, we want the Astros in the World Series. Obviously, we're a fan of them. I'm just saying that this is not going to be too reactionary. We try to be a little bit more logical on the podcast. We're going to have our emotional moments too, please. Don't get me wrong, I'm full of emotion most of the time. I'm full of smack talk most of the time. I'm just saying we try not to get too bogged down in crazy reactions. We try to be logical, as logical as a crazed fan can be. Welcome to this episode of the Space Cadet Sports Podcast. We are recording from a cool night here in Los Angeles. This is Space Cadet After Dark. Welcome. I'm being joined right now by my co-host and co-producer, the Roz to my Frasier. Carla the dog is here with me right now. She may get on mic at some point during the podcast, but that's just because she has her own opinions, and we do not silence females on the podcast here. That's not what this podcast is about. She is allowed to have her take as well. And yesterday, if you're looking for the Texas Rangers series recap, or you're looking for a game recap there, you can check the podcast from yesterday where we break down the Texas Rangers series versus the Astros, and the Astros getting the silver boot for the 8th season in a row, just continually dominating our little brothers to the north in the regular season. We don't want to talk about the offseason right now, but it was a tough offseason. It was a tough playoff series against the Arlington Rangers last year. However, we did go to 7. It was a tough one. I do think that this is helping show that the Astros are still that team. If you want more of those takes, if you want to hear me talk about that more, you can check out yesterday's podcast. Today is the off day goof around. We're going to kind of talk more broadly about the Astros today on this podcast. We're going to talk about some roster moves. We're going to talk, kind of speculate about how what the Astros need to do to go forward. We're going to briefly talk about the series going forward against the Boston Red Sox, mostly because there's not a lot set right now in stone as we're talking about it on Thursday, the 8th. And first and foremost, we are going to start off this episode with something that I've been promising to do for quite some time now. We're going to have drum roll, please. Do it for yourself, the listener. If you could do the drum roll, I'm not going to drop in a drum roll here. So drum roll, please. That's your cue. We are going to have an official update to the Houston Astros Space Cadet Sports official panic meter today. I feel like this has been the season of panic for a lot of Astros fans. I feel like a lot of newer Astros fans perhaps are only used to the golden era of Houston Astros baseball. They only know a team that dominates and gets success on all turns in their season. Maybe that you are a fair weather fan. You've kind of only been part of the Astros when they're winning and have only seen their winning ways lately. Or if you're like me, if you've been a diehard, you've seen this team struggle a lot. You've seen a lot of ups and downs, and you honestly, if you're like me, you watch every game of the season, you keep track of the Astros throughout the season. You know that this team can start slow, that this team can be a little streaky at times. So if you're like me, perhaps you have not been panicking quite as much as the people in the first two groups. In the first two groups, they're full of, the people on X. I like to call them the X-Boys. They're not quite the X-Men. The sports radio callers, a lot of the boomers on there. They're just really, the Redditors get really angry, of course. Reddit can be a very infuriating place, I guess. But, I feel like a lot of the online voices, even some of the podcasters at times have been so angry and so frustrated all season, have been panicking all season. I haven't quite as much. I have not touched the panic meter probably since before the Astros went on their run where they started winning games again and took over the AL West from the Seattle Mariners. That was probably the last time I touched the panic meter, and that was I touched it. I bumped it up to it's go time. That was not a real raise in the panic meter. I wasn't saying that the Astros fans should be very panicked, nor was I saying the Astros should be. So right now we're gonna look at the panic meter. We are going to bump it up, folks. I think that this panic meter is a little low for where we are at in the season. It is August. Soon it will be mid-August, and soon it will be September. Folks, the season is rolling along right now is what I'm trying to say. It will not slow down for anyone. It is no longer just go time. The Astros, while they let's look it up right now, they are, last I checked, they had the lead in the division, but the Mariners do play a game today. It is late in the evening, and I had not checked that score yet. So let's see what the standings are right now. As of this moment, as I've been talking, the Mariners did win their game tonight. So the Mariners are 60-56 on the season. The Astros are at first place right now by slimmest of percentage points because the Astros have played less games than the Mariners. But right now, it is neck and neck for the Astros and Mariners. I think right now what I just did is a good indicator of that we are raising the panic meter up because it is now officially time for hate watching. That's right, folks. The time has come for me to start watching the Mariners and the Rangers scores and root against them. Honestly, this is probably the highest the panic meter has been for me in peacetime, aka non-playoff time for the Houston Astros. During this golden era run, I have not had too many panic moments. Usually this era has really spoiled me so much that I have not had to stress on any other team during the regular season. Even last season, I was so convinced that the team from Arlington couldn't sustain success that I wasn't worried about losing the division. And even if we did, I liked our chances to go further in the playoffs than the Rags. I definitely was wrong, but I still think that, their bullpen was so whack and their pitching was so suspect that if you run the teams through simulations, the Astros would win a 7-game series 8 times out of 10. I really do believe that. I think the team from Arlington, you got to give them their flowers because they rose above the odds and they played in the moment and they didn't give in and they played outside of their minds. So, I'm not trying to throw too much shade at them. I'm just that's truly how you have to play in the playoffs, is you have to play above the moment and better than the moment, and they did. I'm just saying, I'm not trying to take away their wins or make fun of their talent. I'm just saying I really would bet on the Astros talent 8 times out of 10. I think they were the superior team, but a lot of times the superior teams get beat in the playoffs. That's just how it goes. They were out hit. That being said, I wasn't watching other teams, even in the playoffs back, the last couple of seasons. This team and their efforts and their lack of health has me checking the scores at this point in the season, in the summer, I don't remember the last time I've done that. And if the Astros keep losing, and I can see the hate watch growing stronger, I really, for me, hate watching, I don't like the term, but I mean, arguably that is what I'm doing. And you don't want to actually hate other things. You don't want hate to be the main driver in your life. So I say this, with a, full tongue in cheek, but I do not want to hate other teams. I don't want to hate other players. When I say it, I don't truly mean it. It's just for giggles, but I am definitely in this moment where I'm watching the Mariners, I'm watching other teams' scores regularly, and that's where we are in the panic meter. It is definitely time to not only watch and keep track of your team, you have to keep track of other teams too. And I feel like, we're getting a little bit of a taste of our own medicine as Astros fans. We have been dominating these last couple seasons. We haven't really had to worry about other teams. All these other teams have definitely been watching the Astros during their successful years, just hate watching. So you understand why a lot of these teams do despise the Astros on many different levels, but one of them being their continued success. A lot of teams have had to see their team struggle to get to the playoffs where the Astros just marched right ahead. So you understand a little bit of that hate. They hate us because they ain't us. And let's go ahead and move on. Now that I am rhyming, let's go ahead and move on to injuries and movement. There has been a lot of movement on the roster in the last week. We definitely want to touch on some injuries for the Houston Astros and where they are at, where they are progressing. The first thing I wanted to talk about was Luis Garcia. Luis Garcia, unfortunately, has stalled in his rehab. He has had some elbow soreness, and he went from throwing some bullpens to potentially going on some minor league rehab starts to now just being a no-throw. So Luis Garcia is a no-throw. They haven't quite given him the Lance McCullers treatment of saying that Luis Garcia will not pitch this season. However, this stall in his rehab is not exactly what Astros fans were wanting to see. This stall in his rehab honestly makes that Yusei Kikuchi trade that much more important. I know Astros fans were very critical of the Yusei Kikuchi trade. I'd say that I was critical, but I was not very critical. You can go back and check the receipts. I was not one of those crazy haters out there saying Kikuchi was garbage. I was just saying that maybe we paid a little much. And the only thing that will help ease the price of what we paid was if Kikuchi helps the Astros get to the playoff push, and if we get to the World Series, obviously none of this will ever be talked about again. You can go check the receipts, go check the previous podcasts. But if Luis Garcia doesn't make it to the field this season, that Kikuchi trade definitely will be seen in a different light because we need pitchers right now. And speaking of needing pitchers, if Luis Garcia is a no-throw, Justin Verlander right now is giving us some hope. In his latest bullpen, he threw 37 pitches in his bullpen session, and he is set to start a game this weekend with the Sugar Land Space Cowboys and has already been announced on social media by the Space Cowboys to be with the team rehabbing. So hopefully there's a little bit of hope there. We are rooting for Verlander to come back. For the most part, he has not pitched. I believe I don't have it in front of me, but he's only pitched some. I want to say 50-something innings this season, maybe under 50 even. Maybe he hasn't hit that tier. I'll look it up in a second here. But Verlander, rehabbing with the minor league teams is paramount to the Astros' success. Unfortunately, at this juncture, it's not just a rehabbing Verlander. It's Verlander coming back and being successful. We don't need just a pitcher. Right now, we need somebody who can give us an ace. I really feel like Framber has struggled a little bit in that ace role this season. He's coming off of a no-hitter. He's now finally getting some momentum in his season. So I'm not trying to disparage that. I'm just saying he hasn't been a true ace the whole season long. He's starting to get there. The timing is perfect. We need him for the playoff push. We need him for the playoffs. We need Verlander to come and help stabilize the front end of this rotation and play like an ace. We need him to be our number one, at least to push Valdez for that number one spot, because Ronel Blanco and Spencer Arrighetti and Hunter Brown, while they have all pitched great this or good to great this season, they are at, we're looking at how many innings that these gentlemen have pitched this season and wondering how many more we can get out of them while they're still being effective. So we need Verlander out there. We need him to be successful in these rehabs. Now remember, successful rehabs don't always mean successful starts. Whatever they're looking for in Justin Verlander's pitching arsenal and in his shapes, whatever they're looking for, that's what we want to execute. Don't get too thrown off sometimes by those rehab start stats. We just need Verlander to come back and be successful and be able to slot in to the front end of that rotation easily. We want that consistency from Verlander. And while we're talking about starting pitchers, let's go ahead and talk about some of our relief pitchers mentioned in a previous podcast, but it hasn't been getting that much attention. Rafael Montero, while a lot of fans might not like that name, he's been having some struggling seasons as of late. He has been DFA'd. He cleared waivers and he accepted his assignment to his minor league assignment. He is now in Sugarland, pitching in Sugarland. Another mention is Kendall Graveman. Kendall Graveman, who most of us know from last season, a couple seasons ago actually. We traded for Kendall Graveman once, then we traded for him again last season. We traded for Graveman. We traded the Corey Lee to the White Sox for Graveman. Graveman came over, he got injured, hasn't really done much for us this time around. However, Graveman, there's a little bit of rumors that there is a potential for Graveman to join the team late or in the playoffs for the Houston Astros this season. I don't know if that's just wishful thinking from Graveman, hoping that he can get there, or if that's actually something that is doable. But at this point, our bullpen has been taxed just as much as our starting pitching. Some of these bullpen arms, we don't know what we can expect out of them because they've pitched so much. We're looking at you, Taylor Scott. We're looking at you, Seth Martinez. You have been great for us, but we're just, a little worried about how much innings your arm can take in a season. So having some help from a veteran like Kendall Graveman, even if it's really late in the season, even if it's just for a playoff push, would be important. And I'm hoping that there's some truth to those rumors. Moving on here, let's talk about rookie Zach DeZenzo. Zach DeZenzo was called up to join the team. We talked about him during the last podcast recapping the Rangers series. He made his major league debut as a designated hitter. He started the next game as at first base. He flashed a little bit of leather. He definitely got some hits in that game. So it was good to see Zach DeZenzo find some success, pour some life into this offense that has really been inconsistent this season, but sputtering a little bit since the trade deadline. Zach DeZenzo is the Houston Astros' number 4 ranked prospect, and he's really been fast-tracked through the minors, playing very little time. And I believe he even started the 2023 season in single A. He got fast-tracked to double A this year, I believe. I might be a little off on that. I do apologize. But I know for sure in this season he played very minimally in double A with Corpus Christi before he was moved up to triple A in Sugarland. And he only played a handful of games in Sugarland before being promoted to the majors. So the Houston Astros farm system definitely sees something they like in the swing of Zach DeZenzo. They believe that Zach DeZenzo, potentially is one of those names on the short list of someone who could replace Alex Bregman if we lose Alex Bregman. He's been one of those guys that a lot of my, reading about Houston Astros' future or the prospects, he's one of the names that jumps up there for being a potential replacement for Bregman next season, or who would be slotted in there as the backup third baseman next season if we didn't have Bregman. So this guy getting some playing time is not just, good for Zach DeZenzo, but we're trying to see what we have in him as an organization and as fans here. He is a corner infielder with the bat. He got a lot of starts at third base, but they've been trying to get some first base playing time in for Zach DeZenzo, and he's been called up here to give some time off to John Singleton, who has really had a huge workload as well. We're talking about workload with the pitchers, and some of these pitchers having a higher workload, really taking on a higher workload than they're used to. It's the same thing with John Singleton, who has been in and out of baseball, since we've last seen him with the Houston Astros. But truly, he's been getting, we're getting playing time at the major league level that he probably wasn't exactly anticipating. So getting him a little bit of rest here and there is important. Mauricio Dubon spelling him has been the answer, but lately with Dubon kind of struggling a little bit, bringing up Zach DeZenzo to help spell Singleton was the answer. Zach DeZenzo was not on the 40-man roster, so obviously the Astros had to make some corresponding roster moves to make room for him. They optioned Trey Cabbage down to AAA. A lot of people were a little bit frustrated with that. Some people were thinking that maybe Aledmus Diaz, who had been brought to the Houston Astros and has not done too much since being in an Astros uniform this season, perhaps he was the person that should have been sent down to AAA. That being mainly because, at some point this season, I was on these podcasts talking about the Houston Astros outfield being a strength. But as of late July and early August, the Houston Astros offense from the outfield positions have not been so great. When we lost Kyle Tucker, we didn't miss him for a little bit there because we were getting some good production out of the replacement bats in the outfield, and because Yordan Alvarez was playing outside of his mind for a little bit there. But since Alvarez kind of had turned into just a regular all-star hitter instead of a generational all-star hitter there, he's still playing great. But since he took a little bit of step back from that run he was on, a lot of the Astros hitters, Jake Myers, and to a larger extent, Mauricio Dubon, and to the greatest extent, Chas McCormick and a little bit of Trey Cabbage there, really had lost some power and slugging in their bats and weren't connecting for contact quite as often as we would hope they would at the bottom of that lineup. Aledmus Diaz came in, he started one game at first base, and he has not done much besides that, and in that game he really didn't do much besides just give John Singleton a day off. Obviously bringing up Zach DeZenzo to give John Singleton some time off, it seems like, okay, maybe we don't need Aledmus then. But the reason that Aledmus Diaz was kept with the major league team and Trey Cabbage was sent down was because Aledmus Diaz is a veteran presence. Kind of period, full stop. Aledmus Diaz is there as a friend for Yordan Alvarez, Cuban just like Yordan Alvarez. They get along very well. They're good buddies. He also is there to provide Cuban leadership for Pedro Leon, who is also a Cubano as well. So kind of having that camaraderie and having that veteran presence, while you might not, on paper, on the page, you're like, well, doesn't make sense. Trey Cabbage, might be able to fill some of those holes in the outfield that we're struggling with. I don't think Trey Cabbage is showing that his power and his bat is worth keeping, and his speed, to be honest, he has a really great speed, is worth keeping on the team right now over the veteran leadership of Aledmus Diaz. And I'm not saying I completely agree with that. I do think that right now that makes sense for me Carla, I think, disagrees with me. Carla is a Cabbage head. She says that Trey Cabbage should be with the team because of his ceiling. He has a high ceiling with his slugging, but we just haven't seen it, Carla. I'm sorry. We have not seen Trey Cabbage flash that slugging as much as we would want. I think that he hasn't been on base enough to showcase that speed. So they're going with Aledmys Diaz and the veteran leadership and the pinch hit ability of Aledmys Diaz, and also the defensive versatility. Dubon has not been quite as easy to slot in to everyday or almost everyday positions in that lineup, whether that be a defensive replacement, giving somebody a break, or to pinch hit for a contact hit. He really has not showcase the offensive capabilities that he has in the previous season. So I think they're keeping Aledmys Diaz up here as a safety net for Dubon in case Dubon really struggles to find that bat. He did hit a home run. He has been getting some better hitting his last couple games in this last series, but I think they are just worried that perhaps this could be a bad trend for Dubon. And if he doesn't get consistent playing time, he tends not to hit quite as well. So I think that's the thought process there. Carla does not agree. I had to take just the briefest break so Carla could chew me out. She really disagreed with me. She made some good points, but I just did not want to lose an argument on the podcast, so we edited that out. Moving on, talking about the Zenzo move, Trey Cabbage went down, and unfortunately Dylan Coleman had been DFA'd. Coleman was perhaps an exciting bullpen ad from Dana Brown that never really figured it out. He was with the club briefly, but mainly has been in the minors this season. So Dylan Coleman, unfortunately was the roster casualty move in this instance. And there's also another waiver wire ad that I wanted to mention. Obviously the Astros pitching has been so bad that we're just taking anybody. We're even taking junk. Our good friend Jansen Junk was claimed off of waivers from the Brewers. He's a 28-year-old righty with about 40 innings pitched with the Angels and the Brewers over his career that has lasted a couple seasons. This is a fresh arm that may or may not help out our bullpen with an inning or two here, I guess, was what I'm guessing here is the move. The Astros like his stuff. The Astros are just looking for any kind of relief and help because this bullpen has been taxed so much. This pitching staff has been taxed this season. We'll see at the end. We'll have to put an over or under on how many pitchers you think the Astros are going to use this season. If you have that, if you think you have a good over or under for how many pitchers the Astros have this season, definitely reach out to me. Let me know what you think. And we're going to go ahead and move on from the roster movement. We're going to start wrapping this up soon for Carla here, who has a lot to say. But we're looking at the optimistic road here for the Astros. After winning the Silver Boot Series, the Astros get to be optimistic for at least another week longer. This has been a seesaw season where a lot of times we've been up, a lot of times we've been down. For those of you who have been listening to the podcast all season and been listening to reading the blog all season, you'll know that I never have really said the Astros are back. I might have said facetiously that we might be returning to the golden era, stuff like that, but this team has really not really officially turned a corner or turned the page quite that well. They've had a good run. I think in July there, they had a really good run that you thought would almost be it. But then they kind of dipped down a bit. So, this team, with the Mariners maintaining their pace, the division is a must-win this season. I feel like it's something I've said all season long that the Astros have to win the AL West, but more so now than ever, especially when we're going to play the Boston Red Sox coming up in this series tomorrow. And the Boston Red Sox have a very similar record to the Astros, and they're fighting and clawing for the wild card in the AL. If the Astros do not win the AL West, I don't know if their record is good enough to be part of the wild card field this season, because of how strong the AL East and the AL Central have been this season. So we need the Astros to get the AL West crown. That's why it was so important to win that Silver Boot series, not just because we want the bragging rights of the Silver Boot, but because just in case the Rangers hang around and at the end of the season it's the Astros and the Rangers again, and we need that tiebreaker. Right now, for this season, the Astros are not going to have the tiebreaker versus Seattle. Seattle has that tiebreaker. Carla's very upset about that. I am too. I really just think that the Astros need to keep winning these series. They need to be able to take over the AL West. Treading water isn't going to win this division. Just frankly, winning series alone isn't going to do it. They have to win these divisional series as well, even the ones that aren't against the Mariners, because we just need those division wins. I mean, honestly, we can't depend on everyone else losing and being more offensively anemic than us. I know that plenty of times this season I've thrown shots at the Mariners for saying that they're a mediocre team because they're a great pitching team with a very lackluster offense. But the Mariners went out there during the trade deadline and they got some offense. The Astros were, for whether you want to think about it this way or not, the Astros offense has been decent enough that the Astros needed pitching at the trade deadline, and the Astros got pitching. So both of these teams kind of got some movement at the deadline. The Mariners definitely made more moves, but I don't know if it's enough moves to move the needle completely. Or more than the Astros have moved the needle with their trades. We will see, but I think the biggest thing is that they can't tread water and they can't depend on other teams losing. They have to get out there and find some fire in this offense. They went out and made the Zach DeZenzo move. They have Pedro Leon up there. I think they're looking for offensive momentum any way they can get it. And with that being said, I think I wanted to mention the Fangraphs article before I wrap this podcast up. There are definitely more things I wanted to talk about, but I do feel like because it's a late night, I'm running out of steam. Carla definitely is very upset by all the coyotes in the area. We got all these coyotes out here that are howling, and I do know she'll probably get on mic at least once more. I do apologize for that, but I mean, that's what happens, folks. But their Fangraphs recently, this past week, came out with an AL West article where they are talking about the AL West kind of being a toss-up this season. At the time of the article, the Mariners were about 88% likely to win. Let's see that, or not the time of the article, but when the article was writing about the time when the Mariners had the 10-game lead over the Astros, how the Mariners were about 88% likely to win the AL West at that point before the Astros went on a tear. And right now, the Mariners are about 49%, about a 50% chance likely to win the AL West. Right now, both teams are expected to be similar in the standings at the end of the season. At the time of the article, they had 85 and 77 is what the Mariners and the Astros are projected to have at the end of the season. So this is going to be an insanely tight race, and the Astros are going to have to find a way to win more games than the Mariners because I said they don't have the tiebreaker against them. They also mentioned in this article that the Mariners have been winning close games all season and losing players to injury and having to depend on worse and worse hitters can lead to them losing more of these games on the margins. That's why they were trading for so many different players at the trade deadline, because of the people they have right now are just not going to be dependable to win these close games that they have been in all season long. While the Astros are having players playing above their expectations, which is a weird thing to hear when everyone in Houston is saying they aren't playing well enough. Myself included. There's times where I'm saying that these guys are not quite living up to expectations. But the Fangraphs articles are saying that they're pretty much hitting the expectations to playing above them, at least, offensively. They mention also that there's a long road for the team in Arlington. and they're starting pitching. They have a starting pitching rotation on the IL, which is going to be really tough for the Rags, and why the Astros paid, so much for starting pitching, honestly. I think it's funny sometimes that the national media is always going on about the Rangers or the Dodgers having a full rotation on the IL when it has happened to them, this season. It's happened to a lot of teams a couple times, but they definitely don't mention all the teams that have that many starting pitching injuries. The Astros have a full rotation almost all the time on the IL. Even the Fox game, when the Astros played the Rangers on Fox, I believe they couldn't mention the Astros injured pitchers after talking about the Rangers injured pitchers. The announcer mentioned Urquidy, and then I forget the other Latin name he made up when he was trying to mention Christian Javier, but he could not list the Astros pitchers on IL. So I'll go ahead and give that to you here, folks. That's Verlander, Urquidy, Javier, Garcia, McCullers, JP France. That's a starting pitching rotation right there, folks. So I only point at it because the Astros have had a tough time this season. Like getting those starting pitchers. I think right now, as of today, the Astros are a 59% chance to get to the playoffs, or to get to the playoffs as per Fangraphs, and the Arlington Rangers are looking at about a under 4% chance to make the playoffs this season. So Fangraphs is out there pretty much, saying that it's going to be a toss-up between the Mariners and the Astros. So the Astros are going to have to continually win series all the way out. They're going to have to not play down to the talent and sweep some teams that they need to sweep and win series against teams that they need to win series against. That being said, let's give a little quick tidbit. Josh Hader has 24 consecutive saves on as many attempts, which ties Brad Lidge for the franchise record. So that next Josh Hader save attempt we're going to be watching very closely, folks. And I think that's, for all the Hader hate that has been out there, for the people that are mad about the contract, for the people that are saying we should have got Blake Snell over Josh Hader, I'll talk about that a little more on the next podcast. But I do think Hader being this consistent in save attempts is a huge thing. I do think we want him to sharpen up when the game is behind or when the game is tied, of course, but you love to hear it. You love to see it. With the Boston series going ahead, there's all TBA pitchers right now. There's not a single announced pitcher either for the Astros or for the Red Sox as of the recording of this podcast. The Astros rotation, if they're going to kind of go with the standard rotation they've been going with so far, would be Blanco, Arrighetti, and Brown due up. But maybe they're going to have a spot starter or a bullpen game to rest these arms because of how many innings these arms have had to do this season. But a bullpen game, I think, will just tax the pen. So maybe we're looking at a potential minor league starter doing a spot start to buy time till Verlander is back. I mean, I don't even know if we have that many options that I would feel confident about us winning a game with at this point. But maybe we have a major league ready arm that we just haven't used all season. Maybe it's Lauer. We'll see. Maybe Seth Martinez will be called back up for a bullpen start game. Maybe Forrest Whitley would be called up. I don't know. Maybe it's junk time. Maybe we get Jansen Junk up here, or I don't think he's been worked through those struggles quite yet. But Rafael Montero, I don't know why the Astros haven't announced a starter yet. Hopefully everybody is healthy, and hopefully we can get the Blanco, Arrighetti, and Brown, because I don't know if I feel confident with the bullpen game or with any other minor league name that I've just mentioned, or a minor league name that I've just mentioned, because even the bullpen guys, like Martinez, I don't know how many innings he could eat up as a starter here. But we will see. The Astros will need obviously, their starting pitching has been great. I'm hoping that their starting pitching continues to impress, continues to get good outings. Even in those losses, their starting pitching was great. we're definitely looking for the back end of the bullpen to let up a little less home runs there. Presley and Ferguson definitely wore those home runs pretty hard during the Rangers series. And offensively, I really think that the Astros are getting patient, like I was begging them to get patient, and they're finally getting some results. You saw that in the 6-run game versus the Rangers. They need more games like that. I know that there were plenty of men left on base in that game. The Astros have been leaving lots of men on base this season, just stranding those guys out there. But if they can keep doing well and keep getting consistent at-bats, keep working the count, work some walks, get some hits, and pass a baton, as long as they're scoring 6 runs, I don't see this team losing games. They need to be scoring 5 to 6 runs until Verlander and Kyle Tucker get back to their wonderful Hall of Fame selves. I feel like, I'm calling it. Yeah, I think Kyle Tucker has what it takes to be a Hall of Famer one day. If he, still young in his career, but I'm putting him up there. We need those guys back. They've really, Verlander in seasons past and Kyle Tucker this season have really helped solidify this roster, and we need them right now for that playoff push. So let's hope we have a good series. We need to take this series against Boston, at least 2 out of 3, obviously, and we're going to hope for some good health from Verlander and Tucker to come back and join this team. And in the meantime, these Astros continuing to play outstanding baseball and get that W and get those wins. And with that being said, we're going to go ahead and wrap up this podcast of the Space Cadet Sports Podcast right now. Thanks for listening. If you would be so kind and like this podcast, subscribe to this podcast, download the episodes automatically, show us some love, give us a 5-star rating, share us with another Astros fan out there that needs some Astros love. Let's help build this community. If you haven't done it yet, check out the Substack. We have a great Substack, or we have a Substack full of content, I guess I should say, if nothing else, on that Substack at spacecadetsports.substack.com. Go check that out. You can put your email in a field there and get every single post, every single meme, every podcast and video podcast emailed directly to your email box. Or if you're like me and you like an app experience better, you like the mobile experience, get the Substack app on your phone, look up Space Cadet Sports, and subscribe there. Click that little button and you no longer have emails, you just have notifications coming in. You can read everything, every post, every meme, every podcast and video podcast directly delivered to your phone, and I like that experience better. Plus, there's other Substack writers out there. You can read Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, you can read Michael Ian Black. There's lots of other things you can do out there on the Substack universe. Give it a check. And if you want to let me know what the over-under for the Astros pitchers are going to be this season, you can reach out to me on social media at Paul Salazar JR on all social media platforms, or at least all the cool ones. Let me know what you think. Let me know what you think of the podcast. Let me know what you think about these Astros, and if you think whether you think they're going to end up in the AL West standings this season. Thanks for listening to the podcast. As always, keep your head up, son, and vamos Astros.